look at their calendar and look for the most accessible date that you have to get into those papers and start sorting them. We are in March, the first week.
Do you guys mind if I send around like a sign-in sheet and then we can put our names and emails on there?
I actually thought that's what the petition was, so
Oh, no.
if you could, that would be
No, I don't have
helpful.
email.
Thank you.
I do like that one thing we were using where everyone types in a few dates and then we take the date with the
The
most
doodle.
availability.
The doodle.
Yeah.
We need emails
Okay.
for that.
So then if, that's what we can do too, is we can, everyone give your email address. And then we'll just send a super doodle.
Welcome.
Hi.
Hello.
So it's going to take more than 1 or 2 nights of
Well,
going
if
over
we have
this list.
15, if we have 15 people there, let's say, you know, everyone shows up and everyone gets a valuable job and they take it seriously, it isn't
You
gonna
gotta
take
start
long
somewhere,
tonight.
yeah.
Save time, can you get,
Sure.
take down a couple of chairs for them?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Vera, I'm the normal chair.
Hi, I'm Janessa.
Janessa.
Nice to meet you.
Kel?
Cal.
Nice to meet you.
I'll get that.
I've got a quick question. What relationships, if any, does
One
this
more coming
organization
your way.
have with the 2 largest companies, the ones that have the Algot in Minnesota? to
The only
produce
real
stickers?
connection that I've heard anything about, like where I've heard there's a conversation is with Mike.
We don't have,
So I don't
the
know.
answer is none,
There's no
Zero.
relationship.
Interesting.
none at all.
Medical is not our peer issue?
No.
Plus, those are
Consumer-based.
for-profit businesses.
Mhm.
Yeah, nothing sat right with me with the medical thing, and now I know why. It's because you're gonna get monopoly
Yeah.
companies on it. No one's gonna have access
No.
to it.
Mm-hmm.
Is
There-
anybody working on a new bill? Cause this one sucks. Is anybody working on it? Anybody here know anybody who's
Not,
working on
not
it?
that I'm aware of it.
No.
I have the opportunity to provide language for a legalization bill to a member of the legislature. There are approximately 15 or 16 states where legalization bills have been introduced. My task in the next few days is to download the language of the different bills, sort through them, figure out what we can offer to our sympathetic state representative and see whether she'll introduce it. It will not get a hearing, but just getting a bill introduced would move the dialogue and make, it'll get some publicity from the corporate press, give us something to use as a campaign issue. And I'm probably not gonna work on the list here, because I'll be working on.
I applaud the effort, Ollie, but I'd basically download Washington's and fill in
Why
the
not
blanks
Oregon?
for
I
us.
think Oregon's better than Washington.
Yeah?
But I wanna get them all down. Look, anybody who's a lawyer or politically sophisticated and wants to work with me on it, that would be great.
I'd like to help with that.
I still know you, Ollie.
I think excuse me, I just think any medical bill is worthless if somebody can't grow their own.
Right.
Exactly.
And if the insurance companies and whatnot are too afraid of the federal laws to, prescribe it to anyone.
Yeah, and the combustible part, it's.
It is possible that other lawmakers may be introducing bills to liberalize or expedite the medical program. And I don't know if they will. I'm quite sure there won't be any hearings on those either if they're introduced, but the more discussion and debate about the issue in every aspect, the better.
There is a episode of Vice that I think it's like, it might be a month old, but I'm trying to find it right now so that I can remember exactly what state it was, but I wanna say it was South Carolina. There was this, they had a bill that they were introducing, and the community rallied against it and knocked it down because it was essentially 4 millionaires who had put their money together to write the legislation and were writing putting it together so
Ohio.
that at the
It was
end.
Ohio.
Was it
Ohio.
Okay, so now their whole thing is going around, like, it's made people have a different awareness about the fact that there is this distinct difference between you know, myself, Andy, you know, who, us in this room, and the folks who have millions of dollars to profit on the other side of getting this legislation done. So it's, I myself, after like kind of seeing the indignance of the one of the individuals who was involved in that, I am a little bit nervous about, like, you know, how are we building infrastructure for when this is legal in our state, because it's coming? And I think that we have a lot of work to get it done, but I think that there's also a whole other side that we have to start talking about, and that's about how it's gonna be set up as an industry in our state, and who's gonna profit from it, and how it's gonna better our state.
Can I mention, who benefited from when they changed the law to the new one for the internal pain or
Intractable pain.
intractable? I mean, is that because Bachman was losing money, or is that because they cared about the people and wanted to expand the program?
Well, that was a grassroots push to get that done.
It might have just
But-
been hard for them to
I
say
think
no
it
to
was more,
people
I think
coming
it was
in
more
with
to
pain.
do, more to do
There's
with
a
the
lot.
two growers. They wanted more patience and business.
Oh, yeah,
Well, they needed that, but
That's-
without the grassroots, the stories of the suffering
yeah.
and the personal testimonies, it wouldn't happen.
Janessa, were you involved?
Careful how you use that
Yeah.
word now.
That's what it
Yeah, I
took.
spent some
What's
time
that?
testifying to try to help expand that bill.
Use
I
it
saw the video, yeah.
Yeah,
Can you say that again?
I spent some time testifying, on behalf of, patients. I am actually involved in the program myself. I bought medicine once, can't afford it, you know, obviously, it's way too expensive, the program which fail. You know, it's just, it's hard, you know, some people, there are people who are benefiting from the medicine who wouldn't otherwise touch medicine because of the legality reasons.
Right.
And I'm happy for them that they can get medicine, but obviously, you know, like, there's a huge disconnect here. There's a lot of sick patients that just can't afford the medicine. It's dangling a carrot in front of, you know, candy in front of a kid. It's just awful.
And that all starts at the federal level. There's nothing we can do until that changes.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, she's talking about the prices.
Well, you know, it's a lot of greedy, yeah, it's really hard here with.
The pricing doesn't have to be that high, that's just because they want the profit.
But it's how
It's
they're
two,
building the
it's about
industry.
8 times price. I mean, like a gram is about $220.
Yeah, it's-
Yes, a gram of their oil.
That's ridiculous.
Yes,
criminal.
absolutely.
The
No.
oil is condensed though.
Concentrated.
Yeah, it's a
It's,
concentrate,
right, you know,
Still,
but,
that's a lot of a.
Big investment.
you know, when your
Right.
population is sick, disabled people who are on social security, no one can afford that medicine. I mean,
Well,
it's
and
just
what
a
it
joke.
costs to grow it
Right,
and
this
to
is
process it.
money growing
is
on
not-
trees.
Yeah.
Before
You
you,
can't go
before you put
elsewhere.
all your blame on
I
the
mean-
business, remember, this is how the cops wanted it.
Yeah.
So the root of our bad bill, and it
That's
is
why we're
a
here.
horrible bill, lies with law enforcement.
And
Even
what-
vested interest in the status.
And what I heard about it that I find very interesting is that you sign papers saying that if you're caught with a street drug, it's a felony.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, right,
Yeah.
right.
So they're like,
They effectively raised the penalties
yeah,
from
they
anybody
found
else.
a way to
Sorry,
make
sorry,
it more of a
sorry.
penalty.
Right,
Oh,
right.
right on.
Yeah, if you're a medical patient,
Oh,
It's not
nice.
decriminalizing,
Very
it's like
patriotic.
incriminalizing.
Yes.
recriminalized, right, if you're part of that program. Now, lay most of its defects at the feet of law enforcement, and we gotta move from there. But no, it's a bad bill. We're the only state in the country that figured out how to do a medical program where the state loses money.
By the way, as long as we're talking about bills in the legislature this year, I want to give everybody a heads up that you may have heard this or you may not, but the Minnesota Sentencing Guidelines Commission reduced sentences for drug offenses dramatically, like a month ago. They made it final.
Minneapolis or Minnesota?
Minnesota, state of Minnesota.
They reduced the mandatory minimum.
No, the guidelines.
The guidelines.
The guidelines
Sentence of the Minnesota sentencing guidelines. Mandatory minimums are set by statute, and therefore the Sentencing Guidelines Commission has no jurisdiction over mandatory minimum statutes because only the legislature can change a statute. But the Minnesota sentencing guidelines are proposed and administered by the Minnesota Sentencing Guidelines Commission, which is an administrative agency. It was set up by the legislature, okay? And so they have recommended over the years increases, decreases in various felony sentences, presumptive sentences. And they're trying to balance out, or they're trying to bring proportionality to criminal sentencing under the Minnesota sentencing guidelines. That's the basic idea of sentencing guidelines. And by the way, the whole country has them now. It started in Minnesota in 1981. First state to ever come up with sentencing guidelines. But the Minnesota Sentencing Guidelines Commission last month decided to reduce prison sentences for drug offenders dramatically. Starting August 1st, it will go into effect, unless the legislature overrides what they did, which the legislature can't override the Minnesota Sentencing Guidelines Commission. And so now there are bills in the legislature, surprise, to do just that. And so, actually, I have a client who got sent to prison a couple months ago, who wouldn't be in prison under the new guidelines. Yeah.
That's what his girlfriend was telling me the other day.
Right.
There's no grandfather?
So,
Grandfather,
yeah, let's not, I don't wanna take a side road right now, I just wanna stay on track, okay? If you come back to the circle back, or maybe after the meeting we can talk about that. But what I want everybody to know is that I think this is a very, very good thing that the Minnesota Sentencing Guidelines Commission has done, even though it's a baby step. For people like Ian, it's the difference between, 4 years in prison versus probation. So I would like everybody to get the word out and to be aware that we need to support our Minnesota legislators who are supporting the Minnesota Sentencing Guidelines Commission, reduction of prison sentences for drug offenders, and oppose people who are trying to undermine that in the Minnesota legislature.
How do we find out? We have a compilation.
Find out what?
Which ones support
Who's who?
which
Yeah,
ones
isn't there a
are against?
report card, like we should give them A, B, C, if they're,
Oh, that's a
you know?
good idea, make a report.
And maybe that's a project that we could
Yeah,
undertake, or
that's a great
maybe, somebody already has done that. I don't have the answer to that right now.
Al Franken's getting a D, I know
I mean,
that.
a web search could reveal a few prominent examples, within a few seconds.
Chris Curl had a letter in the Star Tribune on this very subject. Because the person who wants to block this is a guy named Tony Cornish,
Tony Cornish.
who's the chair in the House Committee of the Judiciary or Crime Committee, whatever they call it. We all need to learn how government is set up. Most of us in this room do know, but not everybody in normal knows, that we have both the federal government and the state government. They both have a state senate and a state, and a House of Representatives. We have people representing us in Washington and in St. Paul. This is a St. Paul issue. And this is where we need to take the trouble to find out who represents us in St. Paul. And,
Individually.
this is, and then if you contact your state representative or your state senator, even if they are people of a political party that you're not sympathetic to, they will pay attention at this level. You write to your congressman or a United States senator, with our petitions or whatever, they don't pay much attention to it because there's millions of people out here. But there's other state districts are small enough. So, we need, as an organization, to help our members identify, what district they live in and who represents them. And then, just an email, or better yet, an actual written letter, piece of paper, they'll respond to it. They'll pay
And
attention to it.
if you can swing it, they'll all give you your, regulation 15 minutes of in-person meeting too. If you call them, ask for a meeting, you'll get it.
The session starts this next Tuesday.
Is this 152027, is that what you were talking about,
I don't know the bill number yet,
okay,
but it could be.
it says,
It's probably a bill to override the Sentencing Guidelines Commission reduction of presumptive sentences. It's not just drug offenses, but most of it, I think, is.
But that's the part that Tony objects to.
Well, I kinda like Tony Cornish, but he is a former cop, and he does try to basically represent the police union position on a lot of things.
we should, I wanna figure out what that is.
No, he's also a bigot. He was extremely disrespectful to a witness with Tourette syndrome who tried to explain how cannabis helped him medicinally. Representative Cornish used the hearing not only to disrespect and belittle this witness, but to talk about how much he loved busting down doors and busting people for marijuana. That's the mentality that we are combating, but it's an election year, they will listen. You can have an effect.
I have a general question. The normal, on the national level, how much support do we get from them as a chapter? I mean, in terms of like resources, I mean, is there such a thing, or is it just kind of state by state? I mean, is there any kind of like larger coalition?
I think that's a good question for Randy.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, NORML is made up of individual chapters all around it. I mean, encouraged to have as many chapters as possible. And then, it's kind of up to you, because it's so different in each part of the country.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of what needs to be done in your area. As a rule, I mean, NORML has, if you want to, normal.org, they've got all kinds of resources on, you know, what our position is
Okay.
and different court cases, and you can go onto normal.org and you can get a
Mhm.
wide array of stuff. But they haven't been one to really fund the individual chapters. I mean, their requirement is the individual chapters should hold a fundraiser once a year and give half their proceeds to NORML. That's one of the requirements to be a chapter. And so,
Okay.
we've never done that, but I've donated a lot to NORML, where I don't think they're that concerned about Minnesota NORML
Okay.
doing our part. But yeah, if we, I mean, we've had events like, you know, Neil Franklin and Keith Strop and the founder of NORML and the founder of LEAP and.
LEAP is great.
Yeah, LEAP, I love LEAP. I always like wearing a badge and a pot leaf, because it always confuses people. But anyway, yeah, so, but they're not like an MPP or a
Okay.
DPA, where they will come up with $3 million to help
Mhm.
fund a campaign,
Sure.
you know.
Okay.
But they're there with a lot of resources.
I would throw out that, Keith, when he spoke to us a couple of years ago at our conference, he gave us a pretty good history, and I think that's online, you may be able to
Yeah.
watch that, but
Okay.
it's really, really quite good. It's probably the best summary I've ever seen about the history of NORML. So he was a young law student in the late '60s, and Ralph Nader was very active with consumerism and setting up public interest law firms and things like that, and public consumer advocacy.
Mhm.
And so Keith said to himself, you know, we should have something like that for marijuana.
Mhm.
We should have a consumer lobby for marijuana. And so he and friends created NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws.
Mhm.
And it started in Washington DC, and it was sort of like a lot of Nader type groups out of DC, where they have an office in DC, and they're trying to look as big and strong as they can, but in reality, they're kind of a skeleton crew, living on a shoestring, you know. And it kind of went on that way for many years. And then at some point, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago or something, the local chapters started getting bigger and bigger and bigger and more important. And I would think of it as kind of the second coming of the legalization movement. The first one was crushed during the Reagan era, at the end of the '70s.
Mhm.
You know, we got decriminalization, and then it kind of